Good afternoon, everybody. All right, so to be honest, most of what I presented, is going to present was said by the first panelist, so it should be short, 5 minute stops, and we'll be out of here. But it's important when we talk about person-centered care, we look at how we integrate communities, civil society organizations, the people who are living with HIV, the people who are affected by HIV in this entire process. So when you look at this image, some of us in this room probably fit somewhere on this. You're either living with HIV, sex worker, gay men, drug use, different things, poor, struggle with your health issues. So you're in this quagmire or this thing that is just intersecting, interrelated, and there are many things happening in your life. Now you could go a little bit further and you could personalize this. This could be me actually. Sexual orientation, gay, I'm HIV positive. I also am a sex worker. Outside of selling sex, I'm officially, when you talk about employment, unemployed. Never finished high school or even primary school. My literacy skills are very poor. I can't read or write, or barely can read and write. And so I'm having these challenges. So what's the approach to treating me as somebody living with HIV with all those challenges? Is it a standardized approach where it looks at how we apply just a uniform care in terms of protocol for that particular person? Or do you consider a person-centered approach, looking at all the determinants of health, looking at me as the individual that is sitting in front of you, seeking your support, seeking your treatment? You know, and a lot of healthcare workers within the Caribbean, and particularly in Jamaica, are faced in this particular position based on resources that are available, the lack of it actually, and whether or not I need to quickly move this person so I can go to the next person. So we are faced with these challenges, but the big issue that we need to consider when we look at the Caribbean response or a country-specific response is that we're struggling with retention in care, we're struggling with viral suppression, we're struggling with linkages, we're struggling with adherence, we're struggling with meeting the targets given to us by international development partners. But we also have a duty to the persons, to the people that shows up for our services. And so person-centered approach is very critical and important to this entire process. Now, a patient-centered approach, but in our context, we call it people-person. We don't see somebody living with HIV as a patient or as a client, but I can understand from the health system perspective why you consider somebody a patient or a client. But from a empowerment approach, we stay away from those terminology and we use people-centered, person-centered approach. It has to be looked from the perspective of being available, accessible, acceptable, affordable, and appropriate. And if you go on look at appropriateness, it talks about our services tailored to the specific needs of persons, key and vulnerable populations, our age and gender considered in services package. If we look at acceptability, is it a high quality of care? Are the services free from stigma and discrimination? And we know that stigma and discrimination is a huge issue for us in the Caribbean, for people living with HIV, for key and marginalized populations. Take it a step further. Person-centered approach looks different for each person. Yes, you can provide a minimum standard package that is available. But does it meet the need of the person? Is it getting the person stable? Does this package factor socioeconomic issues facing the person? Is this package of services informed by the person? Did you get my feedback? Did you get my input as the person sitting in front of you? And oftentimes, Because we're operating within a structure and a system which requires to have quick turnovers, meet targets, we don't pay attention to the person sitting in front of us, most of the times. And as such, we miss what is the real issue, why that particular person is not taking your pills, doesn't even care about your pills, but have other issues and stuff to deal with that is happening at home, in their community, just need to make a little money. So medication treatment is not my top priority at this point in time. And so the determinant of health, in this case, or the social determinant of health, requires you to dig deeper, to go further. As the healthcare provider, as the NGO programmer, as the whatever you title yourselves as. The importance of this holistic patient-centered approach to providing care for people living with HIV, looking at it from an economic, social, emotional, and physiological approach to have the potential to improve retention in care and ART adherence. Typically, this is how it looks in Jamaica when we talk about person-centered approach. It's not expansive, and I can rationalize or explain some of it. So you look at stigma and discrimination, we could broaden that and say human rights and look at all the elements and areas where this is concerned. Social support definitely is important. The integration of care, moving away from silo-specific HIV-related clinic days to integrating HIV, persons living with HIV in the broader clinic. Differentiated healthcare, moving, having evening clinics, weekend clinics, delivering medication, all those things are a part of a people-centered approach. And decentralized services, moving away from even your blood samples having to travel how many miles to Kingston. Now we are developing different blood banks, let me call them blood banks for now, in different areas across Jamaica. And so this is how it looks, or part of how it looks. Now, if you look at how community-led organizations, civil society, NGOs are a part of the mix, and I hope you can see this, there's the community support aspect, youth services, advocacy, health support. And I gave it these 4 titles, and they're not necessarily expansive. But it goes to show you that a part of person-centered approach to care in HIV requires the involvement of civil society, community-led organizations. Within the context of Jamaica, I don't believe we would achieve a person-centered, people-centered approach without these organizations that are here. The government doesn't provide some of the core services that these NGOs provide. And the important part of this as well is that the government recognizes their challenges, the gaps that they have, and have been partnering with these agencies, these organizations, to meet the needs of the community of people living with and impacted by HIV. So for example, you're seeing, most of you know JASL, Jamaica AIDS Support for Life, and I've placed them under health support. But JASL also does advocacy, JASL also does community support, and they also provide services for young people. You're seeing Equality for All, which is an advocacy organization for the LGBTQ community, very strong where advocacy is concerned, but also have a very robust HIV arm of their organization when we talk about advocacy and when we talk about providing information to the community. So, important elements to people-centered approach: 1, community empowerment, skills building and educational grant, entrepreneurship grants, short-term housing. These are some of the core things that we have to provide when we talk about people-centered approach. As I said earlier, it's not about treatment only, it's not about medication only, because half the times or most of the times the person sitting in front of you are having some of these challenges. Food security is important. Stipend support is important, and I call it stipend support, but actually it should be a part of the programmatic response when we look at marginalized communities. Oftentimes we see stipend as an additive to the ingredient or something that stands by itself, but in order for your programmatic arm of your organization or your interventions to work, you need to look at stipend as a big part of that process. Support for diagnostic testing to improve health outcomes. We have an aging population, especially in Jamaica, of people living with HIV. half the time when they come to you, it's not about HIV, it's about something else that they need support with. Community-led monitoring of service providers. It's an important part when we look at people-centered approach. How are you utilizing the community? Social assessment and linkage, identifying needs. Now in Jamaica, we call it the PAHO program or the National Health Fund. In other countries, it may be titled differently. Back to school support is also a part of the process. Take it a step further when we're looking at gender equality and gender-based violence prevention are also important part when we look at people-centered approach. We have organizations that are dedicated to providing GBV work. E for Life is one such organization, and the Jamaica Community of Positive Women provide substantive, essential services for women living with and impacted by HIV. We also have a trans-led organization, Transwave, that does a lot around trans-led advocacy and gender-affirming services. They're also a part of the HIV response. Reducing stigma and discrimination is a part of the process when we look at people-centered approach. And I just moving it away from healthcare and not thinking that you're addressing stigma and discrimination only within the healthcare sector. So now we're moving into the private sector. We have partnered with the Manufacturing Association of Jamaica, the private sector organizations of Jamaica, into the HIV response, talking more about HIV-related issues and how particular communities are affected by stigma and discrimination, access to justice, redress and legal service representation are also a part of the process. Now, in terms of recommendations, the first one is sustainability of NGOs, community-led organizations. We will not reach where we need to go or where we need to be if we are not looking at sustainability of NGOs and community-led organizations. I know we're talking a lot about integration and of government services and looking at what we have and making it work. But we're not there yet as a region in terms of acknowledgement of certain communities, much less to be providing treatment and care for those communities. We have to be frank and honest where that is concerned. So in my home country, there's nowhere we're going to be talking about trans and LGBTQ or MSM gay man because we know where my country is where that is concerned. So we'll continue to do things in private, but the government will not, and they have indicated that they will not take on anything related to that community until there's a change in the law. Investment in healthcare and health system strengthening, this is also important. So while we're saying, yeah, look at civil society, you're also looking at government as well. We're not saying the government system is perfect. We're not saying that we should ignore the government system, but they also need some investment and some scaling up, health system strengthening as well. Strengthening coordination and engagement of civil society organization. We have a consortium in Jamaica, it's called Civil Society, old age. Yeah, it's a consortium, it's a network of all the civil society organizations in Jamaica. It's a registered NGO. It is led by each of the organizations in 2-year intervals in terms of being the chair of the Civil Society Forum for HIV and AIDS. And it coordinates all the advocacy efforts among the community-led and civil society, well, NGOs in Jamaica. This is very good if you can coordinate within your countries, because while you're holding yourselves accountable, you're also holding the government accountable. And let me just say this. You can be friends with government, you can collaborate and work with government, but at the end of the day, your responsibility is to hold them accountable for the services that they provide for the communities that we serve. Human rights barriers needs to be addressed. Laws, policy guidelines, spaces outside of health, where sometimes we focus a lot only on health spaces when we look at human rights barriers are reducing, eliminating these, and so we need to go a bit further. If we're looking at HIV as a development issue, moving it away from health or just health, then we need to look at other areas where our communities access, where they seek other services as well. And the final one is addressing gender-based vulnerabilities and disparities through community-led monitoring, through utilizing the communities to act as points for report and redress opportunities, and integrating community into the healthcare process. We have a very good model in Jamaica where the Ministry of Health recognized the importance of people living with HIV to be a part of the treatment and care team in different treatment sites across the island. And so they have utilized these persons to work with those PAHO within sites who are considered unstable, who are lost to follow-up, who are non-adherent, who are considered risky, whatever terminology that we like to use. And it has been reaping good results in terms of getting those persons to viral suppression undetectable. It's all anchored within this. I believe this is a UNAIDS diagram. And if you look at the red section, it talks about 90% of people living with HIV and people at risk are linked to people-centered and context-specific integrated services. Thank you. That's it.